honestly, it was Julian. My background, right, is not in electoral politics at all. I'm trained as a lawyer. I was working in social justice movement work, so kind of broadly, but that actually brought me to HUD. I was working at HUD while Secretary Castro was the secretary over there, and he and I ended up working on a project together, and I was just really taken with him. I really appreciated the way he approached work, and it felt like what I kind of associated with more of a social justice activist mindset from a politician, which was very new to me. And so I was just really excited about that. I really liked him. We ended up developing a really close relationship. And so I've just kind of stayed with him. So when he decided to do this, that's why I decided to.
It's, what's remarkable about Secretary Castro is that there's so many people who come on my show and like him and talk about him. In fact, I was on Joy Reid's show Saturday, and Alicia Garza was on, and talking about Secretary Castro, how great he is. I'm being sincere, I don't get why he doesn't resonate more in the polls. I keep waiting for this moment, and I know you're the campaign manager, so I'm not asking you a question like, what are you doing? What the hell's going on? Do you have any sense of why he doesn't resonate more? Because people like him. He has this background. He's done the work. He was a mayor, did a great job there, then HUD. And he's putting out policy after policy, getting no press for it.
I think it's tough. One thing I always do try to remind people, because I get this a lot from our supporters. People are just like, what can we do? How do and what I try to remind people is that the polls aren't the only reflection of whether or not he's resonating. I think he really is resonating. I think that one of the tough things right now about the structure that we have, and I do not fault the DNC for this, I think that they were in a tough situation and they have tried to make the most of it, but the forced pacing of this cycle, the everyone kind of has to get to the next polling threshold, has really made it difficult. Because if you're running a campaign like we're running, where you're centering people who have not always felt brought in and who are not sort of always participating in the process, the excitement that they're feeling doesn't usually get reflected in polls, right? Because these are not necessarily the folks that are getting polled. Like I think there are a lot of young people who are really enthusiastic about what is happening. I think there are a lot of folks of color, a lot of first-time voters. I think that there is a groundswell of support that hasn't been reflected yet, but I don't think it's because it's not there. But
you're seeing what's on the ground. I mean, you're seeing what's going on in Iowa. You've been in New Hampshire. You see what's going on with the candidate.
When he speaks, he's resonating with people. Mm-hmm. People are feeling brought in, and they're feeling, especially in this cycle where we have the president that we have. I think there are a lot of people who are like, wow, there's somebody who wants to talk about some of these tough issues, even when they're tough, and to be honest about them, and to put, the person who's coming with integrity and who's centering some of the voices that have been left out. People are that is speaking to people. And so I think the trick is, how do we get that support reflected, so that, because all of these things have a ripple effect, and that's the problem. They're so connected. It's that you get a good poll, and then press is like, oh, what are you guys doing? Exactly. And so you get a lot more press, and that ups name ID, and that so it's so cyclical that it's tough, because it feels like when the polls aren't coming, the press also isn't coming, and the money is slower. And so all of those things lead to this idea that it's like, well, clearly it's not working. But if one of those things changes, what you see is they all change, right? So it's not the most satisfying answer, because it's sort of like, I think it's happening. I think the trick is figuring out how to capture it. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's important, because I think that the very people who are excited right now need to be reminded that even if you're not being reflected in the polls, like, we see you.
Why, the next debate's December 19th, and the qualifying date is December 12th, and you need a certain number of I think it's 3%, depends on the polls, national or state or different, certain number of donors. And as of now, with Senator Harris dropping out, it would be an all-white stage of candidates. And that could change. There are people on the cusp of, and I tweet about that, and others, and some right-wing people got upset, and I'm racist because I want to have embracing diversity somehow. This is the bizarre world we live in. Exactly. Racism is wanting to have people with other authentic voices. So let me ask you that question. Why is it important to have authentic minority voices on stage on December 19th at the debate? I
think it's important. I think there are two distinct points that sometimes get conflated.
Okay.
One is the literal representation. I think that in a historically diverse field of candidates, if we get to a point this early, before nobody has voted, where there are only white people on the debate stage, and that's communicating to people that these are the front runners, these are really who your choices are, I think that will be an awful reflection for the Democratic Party that is going to need to bring together a coalition of people of color, of young people who are going to feel shut out and are going to not see themselves reflected on that stage. I think separate and apart from the representation issue, there is the fact that very often it's the folks of color that are raising the issues that matter for voters of color. So they're not one and the same, but they are clearly related. One of the things that I've been most proud of about this campaign is that Secretary Castro has consistently talked in explicit terms about racial justice and the need for racial justice. And he's done it in a way that makes people feel bought in and pulled together, and has sort of undermined this idea that talking about this stuff is divisive. And I think that's really powerful. And I think a lot of people have appreciated that and want to have that to continue to be a part of this discussion. And if there aren't the people on the stage that have consistently brought that stuff up, my fear is that we backslide. I think that we have seen in this cycle people talking more explicitly about race and being honest about it and leaning in a way that if you start losing the voices that have been the leaders of that, there is always the invitation to treat this stuff like it doesn't matter and let it go under the surface. And that is a very scary thing to do in a cycle, again, where we have people who are trying to exploit that stuff and, use it to actually tear people apart. I'm
chatting with Maya Rupert. She's Secretary Castro's campaign manager. She's here in New York, and Secretary Castro's out there doing what he does.
Yes.
If only Secretary Castro was a billionaire, let's say, how much easier would life be if he was just like, or not even like a $500 million guy, just like, because life would be. Just think about that, honestly.
Seriously,
But why didn't he go out and make $1 billion? I mean, Michael Bloomberg said, anyone could have went out there and made the money.
Anyone could have done it, apparently. Right, I don't know why he chose not to do that.
Why did he want to serve America instead of just make money? What the hell is wrong with Secretary Castro? Would you talk to him about his priorities are clearly screwed up?
I will. That was a frustrating comment to hear. And it's, honestly, I think intellectually, money in politics is a problem, and
sure.
Kind of
very much so.
All the reasons, but I don't think I had really appreciated how much until we started this process, and I realized, because Secretary Castro was not coming from an existing office.
Right.
We didn't have a committee where we could transfer money from. We had almost no list. We were really starting from scratch.
Wow.
And we have sustained, but consistently, I mean, let's be real, we have not been the top earning campaign at any point, right? And we knew that coming in. He and I talked about that a lot, and our thing was always just like, well, we're just gonna have to, he always says, we just got to do what our families have done and do more with less, and that was, we came in knowing that this was going to be a scrappy campaign. We were going to, kind of do things a little different, sometimes because we thought it was the right way to do it, and sometimes because it was the only way we could get it done. But we knew that coming in. But to watch the impact that money can have, that there are people who can come in late and just push money into states and get their poll numbers up, or put a bunch of ads and just be in a different position to actually see that in real time. That was a frustrating thing to witness.
It is on some level. I like Tom Steyer. I want to be clear. I knew Tom before he was running. He would come on to about climate change and stuff like that. So to me, there's the good billionaire and the bad billionaire, and the bad one is Bloomberg. And my concern about this debate is that, look, we follow politics closely. You're heading a campaign. We understand there's DNC rules. But if someone has not watched any debates and they turn on for the first time, they go, and they're of color, and they go, wow, Democratic Party looks like the Republican debate from 2016. They're all white. How are you not, upset's not the right word. How are you not focused, though, more on the DNC to say, you got to change your rules for January? Are you advocating for that?
I definitely, I take the same position that, Secretary Castro has taken in this, which is, he said he's not trying to change the rules in the middle of the game, but he's trying to change the game. I think there are a lot of changes that we need to make. I absolutely, the primary schedule, I think it gives an outsized level of attention to certain states, to certain voters, and to certain issues. And so if you're centering different issues, you're not going to see the same resonance, because people are going to say, well, how's that going to play in Iowa? Right. It's the sort of forced pacing. And again, what I mean is, with the DNC, I think that they were in a tough spot and trying to do something. I do think that, if they, earlier in the process, they were doing sort of one or the other, right? It was either you meet a certain donor threshold or you have polling.
Right.
And so, I do think that there's value to giving people an opportunity to prove that they have grassroots support, and that should, that should matter for something, because again, polling is up to whoever happens to get called, and that doesn't really reflect whether there's excitement for a campaign. I do think that there are changes that need to be made. I just say that because I think it's a tough job. I was just sort of kind of giving honor to that.
I hope they change the rules for January. It's too late to change from December. I understand we have a deadline coming up in just 3 days from now. But to change them in January, because that's the last debate before February, before February 3rd, Iowa caucus, and next week is New Hampshire, to have whatever numbers they want to do it, but to be more inclusive.
Absolutely.
And not based on race, because that's morally unjustifiable, as Martin Luther King talked about. And where do we go from here? It's morally unjustifiable to support someone because of their race, just for their race, or to oppose someone just for their race. So I'm not anti-white. I'm half white. I'm half Arab, I'm half Italian. So, it's like, it's not at all about that. That people, and there's a caller, Jim, we won't take the call, but he had a question. How does a minority candidate talk about race without triggering white people? And there are certain white people you're going to trigger. There's nothing you can do. Let's be blunt.
Yes.
There's certain people you can't reach. But what about there's got to be some in the middle who have issues about race and they don't know how to talk about it and they just don't want to hear about it. Like, I don't want to hear about it because you make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I think one of the coolest things I think about Julian as a candidate is I feel like he is, and maybe in the cycle uniquely able to do this. He talks about these issues unapologetically and explicitly, but he talks about them as though they are not insurmountable. The weird thing is I think there's a position among a number of folks that it's like, race is it's better if we just don't talk about it, right?
Yes, I know those people.
And then
they call white people.
But then I think there are some people who sort of have used race in a really insidious way to try to divide people. Right. The weird thing about those two positions is that in an odd way they're connected, because at their core they're kind of animated by the same assumption that this whatever this is, that it is naturally bad and it is so insurmountable that bringing it up is either going to be just inherently divisive, or yes, bring it up because it's divisive, but at its core we're saying the same thing. There is another way to talk about it, and I feel like Julian is able to do that in a way that is yes, this is real and it is painful, but bringing it into the light, this is the only way we're going to move forward, and that we can. There's a he has sort of the moral imagination to think about the concept of, an idea of us getting past some of this stuff. And I think that there are a lot of people that are really hungry for that right now and are ready to reject this idea that at its core, there's no way to do this stuff that doesn't immediately turn people off, whether you want to or not.
You've known Secretary Castro for a long time. Is there anything you can share with us that, like a nice thing or any kind of anecdote or something about him that, like, if everyone just knew this about the guy, they would all love him? No, not a bad thing. Unless there's a bad thing, you want to share it, we'll make press. That's great. It's good for the campaign.
Sure. No, you know what? I think, and I say this lightly because it's something I don't like to tell him very often, but he's actually very funny. And I say I don't like to tell him that very often because a lot of his humor is at some of our expense, I would say. He teases, he's a lot of fun. I told a story once, I'm like deathly afraid of like spiders and bugs and he gives me a really hard time about it. He'll text me like late when it's like you're thinking, oh shoot, what's going on? And it's like a video of like a scorpion carrying babies on its back.
He's Secretary Castro.
The thing is he's a twin, right? I feel like they grew up just learning how to torment each other.
God,
and so now they like,
you're right.
We're like that. So I become an outlet for that. So yeah, no, I think that is something that people don't always get because he's very serious. He's a very, sort of pulled together guy, but he's also he's a lot of fun. He's really funny.
So let's take a quick break. We'll come back and chat for a few more minutes. I'm chatting with Maya Rupert. She's Julian Castro's campaign manager. And we'll talk about, you're only the third black woman to be a campaign manager for a national presidential campaign. And why is that in today's day and age when our party is so diverse? Why? The last one was 2008. Something's wrong. There's a lot of questions we've got that within our own party has to answer these questions. Yeah. We'll be right back after this break.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live here Monday, December 9th in studio with Maya Rupert. She's Julian Castro's campaign manager. Coming up next hour is actually Julian Zelizer from CNN, who I'm going to call Julian the entire hour because of chatting with you. So let me ask you, you're only the third black woman to be the campaign manager for a major presidential candidate. Donna Brazile famously in 2000 for Al Gore, Maggie Williams in 2008 for Hillary Clinton. Do you have any sense of why? Because the number one group of people who support the Democratic Party, black women, yes, by far, 92, 93%. So why is it? Any sense?
Like, I know, I think that is utterly ridiculous whenever I hear that statistic, because you're right. I mean, typically when a group is sort of the backbone of a party, that confers a certain level of power that goes along with that. And that transfer has not really happened with black women. And I think there are a few reasons. I think look, for a very long time, these positions have been occupied by white men, and therefore people think those are the people with the right level of experience, right? I think there's also a lot of barriers to getting into politics that are going to disproportionately hurt people of color generally, especially women of color. I think, first of all, half the time you're working for free, like for a very long time, internships were unpaid, organizers were incredibly underpaid. Thank God we're starting to unionize and actually pay people. But so folks would need to, already have some way to pay the bills. But then two, you have to get up and move, right? Like a lot of times, so that is going to make it much harder for women to take on a lot of these roles, because disproportionately women are the ones who are bearing most responsibility for childcare and things like that. And so I think a lot of things came together about the industry of politics that made that so people think, well, you haven't, I need you to have gone through an entire cycle in order for me to trust you to, run a campaign. And weirdly enough, we're only getting some people that are taking these jobs. So I think some of it is really pipeline.
Right.
But I also honestly do think that we have to challenge our Democratic candidates more to recognize the expertise that folks have, that even if it is outside of the political world. And I think that, I think we're seeing it more. I hope that it's not a moment of political expedience. I hope this lasts. I think with Secretary Castro, I mean, one of the reasons I trust him so much with this is that at no point have I ever felt like he hired me because of my identity. Sure. He values my, a lot.
Well, you worked together at HUD for years, so he knew you. We worked
together.
Right.
We knew, right.
You're a senior advisor for him, so
exactly.
He knew you well.
But I, when when somebody sort of is treating this as like and then I'll promote this black woman and that'll be, and as a result, you sort of can't do the job the same way. Right. You don't have the same privilege to fail, because basically someone's already treating you like I was taking a chance on you. And I've never gotten that from him.
We always hear, Alicia Garza made the point on Saturday. She goes, black women will have to work twice as hard as white men or white women to do the same job. I would only hire black women if I could. You're going to work twice as hard. It's great. I'm like, this is great. She's going to outwork everyone. Why wouldn't you want just black women working for you?
I mean, it's it really is, and obviously it's an unfortunate truth, but it's real.
I'm just being playful about that.
Oh no, I know that, but that's the thing. I mean, that's how we are professionally socialized.
I have a minute left. If people want to help Secretary Castro, because we've got only a short time before the next debate, what can they do?
Answer your phone. If a pollster calls you and say your first choice is Julian Castro, that's number one. If you happen to not be getting those polling calls, go to our website, juliancastro.com. Take a look at what we're doing. I really do think that it is, it's a unique campaign, and I think when people see what he's doing, they're excited. While you're on that website, feel free to donate literally whatever you can. We really are a grassroots campaign, so
Mai, it was great meeting you. Please say hi, Secretary
Dean.
Castro. Coming up next, Julian Zelizer. He's right there. Julian Zelizer. As I told him, I'm going to call him that. We're back with more of the Dean Obadala Show right after this.